Chapter 26:41. Concubine Sher smiled faintly and held her daughter's hands. Anyway, you'll know when the time comes. There's no need for the three of us to do anything. There are plenty of people who don't want her to have an easy time. Sher Huaixin snickered. Mu Ruyan and Mu Royun looked at each other. Seeing that their mother was so confident, they also looked at each other confidently and didn't ask any more questions. Of course, Abba didn't know that concubine Sher was secretly trying to deal with her. However, even if she knew, she wouldn't care about that woman. How could a weak chicken enter her eyes? The two rested in Yulon Court for the night and woke up feeling refreshed the next morning. Without the noisy maidservants led by Nanny Zhou, Abba felt that the world was much quieter. After washing up, the two sat at the table to eat breakfast. The Mu residents prepared a plentiful breakfast. Mu Qingya was a smart person and definitely wouldn't make things difficult for the Crown Prince and Crown Princess over such trivial matters. The breakfast wasn't as complicated as the ones in the palace. There were 8 refreshing side dishes and a few plates of pastries. The two each had a bowl of porridge and casually ate some pastries before putting down their chopsticks to end their breakfast. Emolien smiled and reached out to hold the little fellow's hand. "Wife, do you want to go shopping today?" The last time they went to Despondent Pavilion, they took the carriage directly and didn't really go shopping. Emolien's suggestion made Sir Jojo's eyes light up. He instinctively felt that his suggestion was really very good. "Where are we going?" Jojo asked excitedly. "Where do you want to go? Why don't we go to your manor to take a look?" Emolien reached out to carry the little fellow and looked at her as she spoke. "My manor? Yes, the area around Half Moon Cliff." "Okay." Abba was instantly interested. Ever since Prince Kong gave her the title deed to Half Moon Cliff's hot spring villa, she really hadn't gone there. She heard that the scenery in that area was extremely good and looked like a rural village. Sir Jojo was somewhat looking forward to it. Especially if he could travel together with his lotus. Just thinking about it made him feel a little excited. Beauties, beautiful scenery, fine wine, and delicious food. Dig ha ha. Jojo suddenly felt a little happy. When Emolien saw that the little fellow was so happy, her mood began to lighten up. "Then let's go," the Crown Prince said with a smile. Taking the Imperial Uncle's garden over was indeed an extremely wise move. Seeing how happy Jojo was, Emolien felt that her heart was about to soar as well. Abba nudged him. "How are we going to get there?" How do you want to go? In a carriage?" No. "Then let's ride together." Abba looked at him with his big watery eyes and nodded repeatedly. "Let's compete. Let's see who can be the first to reach Half Moon Cliff." Emolien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why did this little fellow like to compete with others so much? Okay, as long as you're happy." He pinched her little cheeks with a doting expression and nodded. "Let's go." He patted her back and made the little fellow jump down. The Crown Prince just got up and held his little wife's hand. The two were about to walk out. Hu Dequan rushed in with a group of people and hurriedly knelt down. "Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince, Your Highness the Crown Princess." The Crown Prince had a bad premonition and raised his voice. "What are you doing here?" Chapter 26:42. Hu Dequan couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he saw the Crown Prince's defensive expression. He hurriedly crawled over on his knees and shouted, "Your Highness! The Emperor has decreed for you to enter the palace immediately." The Crown Prince and the Crown Princess looked at each other in dismay. The two of them were just about to go out for a stroll, and this blind person was already nagging and competing. The Crown Prince silently took his wifey's hand and pulled her out. He waved his hand and said, "Wifey, where were we just now?" "We were talking about the horse race heading to Half Moon Cliff," Abba immediately continued. The two of them acted as though they didn't see Eunuch Hu kneeling there and walked out of the door together in tacit agreement. Eunuch Hu, "No, can the two of you not treat this old servant like heir?" "Your Highness!" Hu Dequan cried out as he led a group of people to rush over. "You can't do this. This old servant is right in front of you. Look at me, look at me, look at me. This group of eunuchs rolled all the way from the inner court to the outer court, persistently blocking the crown prince and the crown princess' path. Black smoke was rising from the crown prince's head. This bunch of blind fellows. Didn't they know that he was about to take his wifey out for a stroll? They were already ignoring them, but they still didn't hurry up and scram. They kept blocking his path. How infuriating! Abba looked at Hu Dequan crying so pitifully that his shoulders kept shaking. He couldn't help but purse his lips and droop his shoulders. He said woodenly, "Why don't you go back to the palace with Eunuch Hu?" Seeing Eunuch Hu crying like that, he wished that he could cry his lungs out. Did he have to? He made it seem like she, the crown princess, was bullying him, this old eunuch. Hu Dequan immediately scooted over to her feet. Crown princess, you're too kind. Thank you, Crown Princess. Thank you, Crown Princess. Your Highness the Crown Prince. Eunuch Hu threw himself at the Crown Prince's feet and persuaded earnestly, "Just go back to the palace with this old servant first." "Ah, Your Highness." The Crown Prince was furious. He wanted to kick away the old eunuch who had crawled to his feet. Abba grabbed his hand and said sternly, "Go. I forgot just now. I still have to find the old man to ask for compensation. When you come back, we can go to Half Moon Cliff in the afternoon." The Crown Prince silently retracted his foot, the corner of his mouth twitching. The little fellow shook her head and said seriously, "If you don't accept the imperial edict and enter the palace, your father will secretly scold me in his heart again." Eunuch Hu opened his mouth and suppressed his strange expression of, "How did you know?" Instead, he put on a Crown Princess, "You're so considerate" smile. Then, he coughed lightly and hurriedly stepped forward to say, "Your Highness, you should listen to Her Highness. If we return to the palace now, we will definitely be done by noon." The Crown Prince thought for a moment before reluctantly letting go of his wife's hand. He turned around and shouted at Eunuch Hu, "Quickly prepare the carriage." "Yes, yes, yes. Prepare the carriage to return to the palace." Emolien turned around and held the little fellow's hand. "I'll be back soon. Wait for me at home. You can't sneak off by yourself." Xiao Mu blinked her eyes, feeling curious. Where could she have run off to? You can't go out by yourself. There are many bad people in the capital. Who knew if she would run into those two from the Qin estate if she went out for a stroll? The little Crown Princess nodded eagerly. "I know." The 8th watch ended. Chapter 26:43. How could his wife be so adorable? Prince Emo couldn't help but rub her head. In the next moment, he was surrounded by Eunuch Hu and the others and forcefully escorted away. The little fellow pursed his lips and glanced at the empty house. Now, not a single one of them was left. "Forget it. I'll go to the old man's place first and ask for her reasonable compensation." The compensation from last time had all been awarded to Hui Feng and his gang. According to the old man, the compensation this time would definitely be more than last time. The little guy stomped out of the door. Upon seeing this, Kai Xiu hurriedly asked, "Is the Crown Princess going out?" "I'm just walking around. You don't have to follow me." Miss Chow shook her head and told Kai Xiu and Kai Chi to stay at home. She was just strolling around the Mu family. She really didn't need anyone to follow her around. The little fellow was not a particular person. She did not need the extravagance that noble ladies would pay attention to. She found it annoying to have so many people around. After leaving the Magnolia Court, Auber strolled along the flower path. The old master's north courtyard was the innermost part of the entire southeast inner courtyard. It was separated from the residential area of the Mu family's children. The old man was the head of the clan. Normally, all the clan affairs were handed over to his eldest son, Mu Jingfeng, to handle. He had been in seclusion for almost all these years. Therefore, the entire north garden was filled with lush trees and quiet residences. The architectural style was also based on simplicity and elegance. They walked around Auber at a leisurely pace. Occasionally, they would stop and look around, but they wouldn't stay for too long. The Mu family's mansion built in Winter Moon Mountain Forest was comparable to the residences of the princes in the imperial capital. The 6 great aristocratic families of the Divine Prefecture were the Qin clan of the Elixir clan, the Duan clan of the Concealed Weapons clan, the Mu clan of the Talisman clan, the Dou clan of the Medicine clan, the Long clan of the Forging clan, and the last of the 6 great aristocratic families, the Shi clan of the Smelting clan. Among the 6 great families, the Mu family was usually ranked 3rd or 4th. They were often at odds with the medical family, the Dou family. Even the residence was close to the Dou residence. He had built a residence in the Winter Moon Mountain Forest, while the Dou clan had built a mansion next to the East Peak Mountain. However, the Mu family's back door was still within the sovereign capital. The entire family clan was located in the western suburbs of the sovereign capital. The Dou family's residence was a little far. It was basically out of sovereign capital. Just based on the location of the residence, the Mu clan had the upper hand. Speaking of which, Alba had been in contact with the 6 aristocratic families for a long time. Considering that their branches could be spread across the major lower star fields, it was clear that their power was not to be underestimated. Alba's footsteps suddenly stopped, as if he had sensed something, and he turned back to look. Behind him was a row of short and lush trees. There was a winding path leading to Yulon Court, but there was nothing there. Alba frowned slightly and unconsciously tugged at a strand of black hair that had fallen onto his shoulder. She turned around and walked a few steps. Then, she suddenly turned her head back. Her lips were filled with a trace of coldness. Sneaky, sneaky. Alba turned around and walked away. Suddenly, the little white squirrel jumped out from Paradise Planet without any warning and squatted by her feet. Alba was taken aback. He stopped in his tracks and looked down. The little guy was leaning against her feet, swinging his 4 furry little tails. Chapter 2644. Why did Chochio suddenly jump out? Alba bent down to pick up the little guy from the ground and poked its furry little head. What are you doing? Chirp. The little white squirrel's furry face was twisted into a ball as it looked around the courtyard with a strange expression. Little Chochio had grown 2 more tails recently, and now it had 4 tails. This not only surprised Xiao Mu, but it also made her curious. She wondered how many tails it could grow. Chochio's little black eyes flickered with annoyance as its little claws involuntarily crawled on Alba's body. Chirp chirp, chirp chirp. Alba looked in the direction its claws were scratching and saw a fork in the path beside the flower path. She didn't know where it led to. Sir Jojo took 2 steps in that direction to take a look. What's wrong with Chochio? Chirp, chirp chirp. The little white squirrel kept clawing at Alba's clothes and chirped. Could it be? This little guy wants me to take this path? Alba's eyes suddenly lit up. She herself could not see the expression on her face at this moment. If the Crown Prince saw that expression, he would definitely burst out laughing. Lady Chow Chow's eyes were shining with a strange light. She had an expression of, "Is there a treasure there?" This little white squirrel was used to looking for treasures. Sir Jojo made a prompt decision and immediately carried the little white squirrel to the fork in the path beside the flower path. Yes, yes, it's most likely true. Chirp chirp, if we get a treasure this time, I'll treat you to a good meal. Alba muttered to herself as she carried the little white squirrel into the path. The path was overgrown with trees on both sides, and it looked like very few people came here. Not long after Alba left, 2 youths suddenly landed at the fork in the path and looked at each other in dismay. Why did she go there? That was the Mu family's forbidden area. The patriarch had given an order many years ago that no one was allowed to enter that garden. Who cares if she dies or not? Another young man sneered with a gloomy face. She came home in such a grand manner and made our Mu family kneel and kowtow 9 times to welcome her. This woman has long become the public enemy of the entire Mu family. If she had the strength, then so be it. It would be more acceptable for the entire Mu family to kowtow to a strong person. But now, everyone in the Mu family knew that the little crown princess was a piece of trash who had been brought over from the lower star field. In a place like the lower starfield, struggling to become a level 3 soul master shouldn't be easy. She could only stop here. Are we still going to follow them? Are you stupid? Why are you following them? Don't forget what's in that old garden. Haha, that's right. The young disciple smiled and said, Little Tang, let's go then. The gloomy young man nodded, and the corner of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. Go back and report to young Master De. He hoped that after the young master heard the news, he would happily reward them with a few elixirs like the spirit-gathering pill. The other young man's eyes also lit up, and he nodded repeatedly. Young Master De will definitely be happy with this news. Ever since he was poisoned mute by that little slut, young Master De often threw a tantrum when he returned home. All the disciples in the entire second branch were now trembling with fear, afraid that they would offend young Master De if they didn't do it right. Chapter 26:45. They didn't blame young Master Mulder for being arrogant and domineering and being taught a lesson by the little girl. They only blamed the little girl for not knowing her limits and poisoning young Master Mulder until he became mute. Of course, this matter had nothing to do with the little girl at all. That Mulder, she didn't care what he did in the courtyard, but if he still wanted to jump in front of her to court death, Sir Jojo would naturally let this guy understand why flowers were so red. Chirp, chirp. Chirp, chirp. The little white squirrel urged again and again, causing Auber's excitement to rise a little. Her treasure-seeking mouse was so excited, there must be something big ahead. Treasure. Shell. Auber quickened her pace and ran along a small path filled with withered trees. Xiao Mu was a little speechless when she stood in front of a courtyard that was covered in old green vines. The entire courtyard was covered in vegetation, and even the entrance to the courtyard was blocked by overgrown climbing plants. Wasn't this just an ordinary old courtyard? The vegetation in the surroundings was too dense. Looking at the condition of the vegetation in the courtyard, it seemed like no one had trimmed it for more than 10 years. What was Chirp Chirp so excited about in such an old courtyard? Auber raised her head and looked at the plaque hanging at the entrance of the courtyard. It had been weathered by the wind and rain, and was now covered in dirt and dirt. The 3 words, Chasing Wind Courtyard, were indistinguishable. The black writing had been exposed to the sun and wind for many years, and now it was almost dry and peeling off. This place was like an abandoned haunted house. What good things could there be? Chirp, chirp. Chirp, chirp. Chirp, chirp. Chirp, 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 chirp. The little white squirrel's cries became hurried, constantly urging the little guy to enter. Sir Jojo was a little helpless. Can you speak human language? It's not like you don't know how to speak. Once you're excited, you can't speak human language. Who did you learn this from? Auber thought of the chicken that cooed all day and couldn't help but laugh expressionlessly. Perhaps she specialized in producing this kind of ridiculous breed. Master Silver, Master Silver, Master Silver. Quickly go in, go in, go in. The little white squirrel hurriedly spoke human language and kept urging its little master. There's treasure. Auber's eyes lit up and quickly asked. Yes, yes, yes. Great. Xiao Mu happily ran to the entrance of the garden. She stretched out a small leg and kicked it towards the garden door. Boom! A transparent halo floated in front of her. Mr. Jojo was caught off guard and his small body was bounced back by the power of the light shield. He was thrown back and rolled. Like a small ball, it flew to the horizon. Xiao Mu instantly felt a bit speechless. What's going on? She was actually sent flying by a rebounding force. How was this possible? She was Jojo-sama. Let's not talk about how powerful his spiritual energy is now. At the very least, it was a 10th rank Great Spirit Master with a 1st rank Divine Sense. A 10th rank Great Spiritual Master couldn't even enter someone's courtyard. Was this a joke? Mr. Jojo was still immersed in the sadness that she had been sent flying by the recoil. She raised her head and looked at the gate of Chasing Wind Garden in a daze. After taking a closer look, he could see the problem. The entire courtyard was wrapped in a talisman force. An isolation talisman array? The entire chasing wind garden was wrapped in it. This partition was really seamless. This was how artificial barriers were formed. Chapter 26:46. There must be a great treasure. These words immediately flashed through Sir Jojo's mind. Otherwise, who would have wasted their energy and nowhere to spend it? Why would they build such a powerful isolation talisman array around this shabby courtyard? An isolation talisman array. The little guy took out a few offensive jade talismans from his pocket. I'll just break it. Chirp, 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 chirp. Arbor's hand that was holding the offensive jade talisman paused for a moment. He lowered his head to look at a certain squirrel that was making noise. What? Miss Chow asked in annoyance. Master, master, go this way, this way. The little white squirrel jumped to the ground with a plop, and with its 4 short legs, it ran towards the courtyard wall. The little guy circled around to the back of the courtyard wall. The plants here were even more luxuriant. The green vines climbed so high that even the original color of the courtyard wall could not be seen. The little white squirrel flapped its tiny paws and ran to a spot. It used its paws to dig out a brick from the soil. Then, its paws moved vigorously. In a few seconds, it had pulled out a dozen bricks and stacked them to the side. Thus, a small square door that could only allow one person to pass through appeared on the wall. Arbor was a little speechless. What was going on? This white squirrel really was a spirit. It actually knew that there was a side door here? The little white squirrel stretched its paws in and tested it. Arbor could see with the naked eye that the small side door was rippling with energy. As the ripples retreated to the sides, a gap was torn open. Only someone who was very familiar with talisman arrays could tear open a hole in an isolation talisman array without destroying the entire talisman array. This white squirrel was actually a talisman expert? Seeing its little master staring at it with a shocked expression, the little white squirrel slapped its little head and said with a confused expression, "Master, don't ask me. I don't know why either." What a joke. It did not know how to use talismans. However, it felt that this was some talisman array. It knew that there was a side door here. Although it was very strange, it felt great, okay? You've been here before? No. The little white squirrel patted the back of its furry head. Huh. Arbor rolled his eyes. He reached out and pulled the guy into his arms. He bent down and went in through the side door. After she went in, the transparent isolation rune array, which had been torn apart, gradually closed again. A streak of vague brilliance slid past the side door. Xiao Mu turned around and, unwilling to give up, lightly touched the isolation talisman matrix that had returned to its original state. In an instant, her finger was bounced back by a tyrannical force. Arbor was expressionless. There was a white mouse in the house. It would bring its master in and out of the talisman array. What should I do? Arbor carried the white squirrel and entered through a side door before following a winding path to the inner yard. The courtyard looked very dilapidated from the outside, but when one walked in, one would know that it was very clean and tidy inside. The entire courtyard was divided into 3 sections with distinct levels. Flowers and plants were everywhere, and the fragrance of the plants assaulted his nostrils. The pavilions and terraces were buried in the flowers and plants. Occasionally, a sharp corner of the eaves would be revealed. After going around a long winding corridor, a small 2-story building appeared in front of him. It seemed to be the residence of the master. Puff. A light sound suddenly came from the plants. Chapter 26:47. Following the scent of saliva, the little white squirrel immediately bristled and assumed a battle stance. Master, be careful. Awoo. From behind the small building, a tiger with fiery red fur and a ring of white fur around its neck suddenly scuttled out. Chochio also let out an awoo, causing Sir Jojo's head to be filled with black lines. When a fierce tiger roars, a squirrel like you also howls like a wolf. Where did you learn this weird habit? It's all weak chicken's bad influence. The air here slightly stagnated. At the same time, in Gilded Garden. Mu Qingya and Mu Rochuan, who were currently eating with Mu Jingfeng, were happily chatting with a family of 3. At this moment, a page boy suddenly came in to report that the crown princess had barged into Chasing Wind Garden. Mu Jingfeng's eyes were filled with anger as he slammed his chopsticks on the table, unable to suppress his anger. Didn't I already say that no one is allowed to go to that place? She's causing trouble the moment she comes back. Don't bother with her. Mu Qingya's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly pulled Mu Jingfeng's hand, gently advising, "Husband, aren't you going overboard by saying that to the child? That child has only returned for 2 days, so how does she know? Didn't you say that we can't go to that place? That place is abnormally dangerous, so husband should quickly send someone over to take a look." Mu Jingfeng suppressed his anger as he coldly said with pursed lips, "Isn't she very capable? Just let her be." Mu Qingya couldn't help but panic when she heard this. "Father told us to take good care of her. If she gets injured on the 2nd day of her return, father won't be the only one who can't accept it. If this matter spreads to the palace and the emperor finds out, he might even accuse us of failing to protect the crown princess. Simply troublesome." Mu Jingfeng was furious as he slammed the table. Ziwei. In the Mu family's eldest branch, the elite eldest disciple, Mu Ziwei, walked in and respectfully bowed to Mu Jingfeng. "Master. Go, bring some people to Chasing Wind Garden to take a look. It's fine as long as she's still breathing. It's good to let her suffer a little." "Husband." Mu Qingya had a disapproving look on her face as she stared at Mu Jingfeng and said, "Aren't you just making Xingqian feel bad?" Mu Jingfeng's handsome face darkened as he coldly said, "Let's go in and take a look. We'll help if we can." Mu Rochuan also stood up. "I'll go take a look too, father. Stay for dinner. You don't have to worry about this." "Father, she is also my little sister." Mu Rochuan hurriedly said, "I'll be back soon." Mu Jingfeng watched as his eldest daughter left. He harumphed and turned to Mu Qingya to say, "It's hard on you to be so devoted to her, but she doesn't appreciate it at all and keeps thinking about getting the memorial tablet back. She's making you look bad." And yesterday, Xian had to kneel 3 times and kowtow 9 times along the way. She must have suffered so much. Mu Qingya smiled gently and reached out to hold Mu Jingfeng's hand. "Don't feel wronged. As long as the 2 of you can put aside your differences and coexist peacefully, Xian suffering is nothing." My face was even less of a concern. Stardust had not been feeling well these past few days. "Husband, if you treat Jojo better, Stardust will also feel better." Mu Jingfeng's face was taut, and his heart was burning with anger. Was it because he did not want to treat his daughter well? Was it because he did not want to be close to his daughter? However, that stoic face of hers was expressionless the entire day when she saw him and even scolded him from time to time. Chapter 26:48. No matter how much he wanted to get close to his daughter, he still couldn't stand that cold face. Mu Jingfeng's face darkened. His heart sank when he thought of that cold face that resembled his ex-wife's. Both mother and daughter were the same. Neither of them were likable. After this incident, Mu Jingfeng couldn't eat anymore. He left after comforting Mu Qingya a little more. Servant girl Tsong Lu stood to the side and couldn't help wringing her fingers, not daring to speak. Mu Qingya picked up her teacup and looked back at her with a spurious smile. "If you have something to say, say it. Don't you feel uncomfortable holding it in?" "Madam, this servant doesn't understand." "What's there to not understand? That crown princess treated you and eldest miss so badly, so why are you still so protective of her and treat her so well?" Mu Qingya sighed. "Put yourself in her shoes. That child lost her mother at a young age and only recently found out about her background and found her father after so many years on Sikong planet. But family head. Sigh. Older sister Chu Yun is such a proud person, so her child's character and talent won't be bad. I sincerely hope that father and daughter can bury the hatchet and resolve all misunderstandings. But how could she ever care about you, madam? Look at her, she brought the memorial tablet to slap Madam's face. Right now, all the major patrician families and sects in the entire imperial capital are laughing at you. You've been the mistress of the household for so many years, but you're still firmly suppressed by the former official wife. No matter how capable she is, she's still only the Mu family's second wife. Shut up! A nanny shouted angrily. Tsung Lu, I see that you're becoming more and more impudent and rude. Tsung Lu also feels sorry for Madam. The servant girl stomped her feet and sobbed. All right. Mu Qingya helplessly took Tsung Lu's hand and patted it. She glanced at the nanny next to her. Nanny, don't blame this servant girl. She's also wholeheartedly concerned about me and feels sorry for me. But I really don't feel wronged at all. Don't worry. From what I see, although the crown princess's face is cold, she's also someone who understands the big picture and etiquette. Everything can't be rushed. Take it slow. One day, she'll know that we sincerely treat her well. I don't dare to get too close to her. I'm afraid she'll misunderstand that I'm up to no good. Mu Qingya sighed and said, but I can tell that the child is just a little cautious. She's really a good child. She'll be fine as long as you don't provoke her. After we spend more time together in the future, she will definitely understand the good of the family. Tsung Lu shut her mouth, and the wet nurse Nanny Chiu also nodded and said with a smile, no matter what others say, as long as the old patriarch and the patriarch support you, Madam will always be the mistress of the Mu family. Why bother with those who have been afflicted by the plague and whose mouths are cheap? Mu Qingya shook her head with a smile. A person who looked like a manservant rushed in and said, Madam, all the disciples in the house have heard about the crown princess barging into Chasing Wind Garden and all of them have rushed over to watch the show. Mu Qingya's face darkened. Nonsense. At that time, Aber did not know that his intrusion into Chasing Wind Garden had alarmed the entire Mu clan. At this moment, she was staring at the red-haired tiger. Awoo! Awoo! The little white squirrel bared its teeth and stood in front of Aber. Its beady eyes stared warily at the huge tiger. Chapter 2649. You're courting death. How dare you yell at my master? I'll kill you right away. Using its tiny claws to dig at the vegetation on the ground, the little white squirrel wagged its four little tails, revealing a fierce furry face as it glared at the other party like a tiger eyeing its prey. The grass on the side trembled slightly. Suddenly, a gloomy, scary, wrinkled old face suddenly appeared in front of Aber without any warning. The old woman's movements were very fast. Almost without any pause, like a wisp of smoke, she appeared in front of Aber in an instant. Aber was startled, and subconsciously took a step back, facing an old face that was half-burned black, missing an eye, and wrinkled old skin. Hey-ho! The fierce tiger angrily roared. The old woman suddenly reached out a hand to stop it, and a hoarse voice came out of her mouth. Red hair, stop. Her one eye faintly stared at Aber, staring at Aber to the point that he felt a little scared, and his whole body felt uncomfortable. A string of old tears suddenly flowed down from his one eye. The old woman suddenly knelt down without any warning, and cried out with tears flowing down her face, Miss, you're back. Aber's heart slightly jumped, but he still couldn't help but take 2 steps back, staring at the old woman's eyes, suddenly flashing. Miss, Chen Kuei has been waiting for you here for a long time, and finally you're back. Aber expressionlessly looked at the old woman, and after a long while, he said in a deep voice, You've got the wrong person. The one-eyed old woman called Chen Kuei was slightly startled. Her one eye full of hope looked at Aber for a long time, and suddenly said, You are my family's daughter? At this time, a small noise suddenly came from outside the wall of Chasing Wind Garden. The red-furred tiger's face was full of annoyance, and he angrily roared, wagging his tail, and signaled to the old woman with a glance. The old woman nodded, and said with a sullen face, Chase away all those people. Oh! The tiger roared angrily. Its 4 paws stomped on the ground, and the tiger's body shot out like an arrow. With a whoosh, it shot out of the courtyard wall. The disciples of the Mu clan were all gathered at the entrance of Chasing Wind Garden, trying to get a glimpse of what was going on. Everyone had a curious look on their faces. I heard that he went in for a long time. Why hasn't he come out yet? Don't tell me he tried to show off and died in there. It won't implicate our Mu family, right? Roar. Just as everyone was talking maliciously, they suddenly saw a ferocious beast with red fur and a tiger's head high jump out from the courtyard wall, glaring at them like a tiger eyeing its prey. Wow. What is this? It's a crimson flame spitting tiger. F*CK, I forgot that this place is guarded by the crimson flame spitting tiger. Quick, quick, let's go, let's go. Everyone was in a mess, pushing and shoving each other as they turned around and ran. How could the crimson flame spitting tiger be courteous? It opened its mouth and spat out several fist-sized fireballs. The fireballs landed in the middle of the crowd, and a few of them screamed in pain. Arbor opened the door of Chasing Wind Garden and stood at the entrance, looking coldly at those people who were burned by the flames and running away like stray dogs. A bunch of idiots. Xiao Mu gazed at them coldly before quietly standing in front of Chasing Wind Garden's entrance like this, watching them flee in all directions in a sorry state. A male disciple was caught in the tiger's claws, and he immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. Chapter 2650. When the Mu family's eldest miss, Mu Roxuan, and elite disciple Mu Ziwei arrived with a group of elite disciples, the commotion at Chasing Wind Garden's entrance was already beyond recognition. Meanwhile, the little stoic just coldly stood at the entrance and watched this farce. She didn't interfere or help, and her eyes were as cold as an outsider watching the show. The one-eyed old woman hunched her back and walked to Arbor's side while leaning on a reddish-gold cane. She also coldly observed the chaotic crowd at the entrance. Quickly stop. Mu Roxuan hastily landed in front of the fire-breathing crimson tiger and released a defensive talisman, saving a disciple who was caught under the tiger's claws. That disciple was so frightened that he couldn't stop trembling, and he called out incoherently, Eldest Miss, save me." The old woman sneered, "Who allowed you to come to Chasing Wind Garden to cause trouble? Redhead, you can eat as much as you want today. Swallow all these people who dared to trespass into Chasing Wind Garden." Roar. The fire-breathing crimson tiger promptly tore open a disciple's back with its claws and bit the arm of a female disciple beside him, tearing at her with all its might. Ah! That female disciple trembled all over as she cried out in alarm, Eldest Miss, save me, Eldest Mississippi." Mu Roxuan's complexion was extremely terrible. She turned to look at the silent Arbor standing by the entrance and couldn't resist shouting harshly, "Aren't you going to tell them to stop? Do you really want to kill people?" Arbor coldly swept her a glance before turning to walk inside Chasing Wind Garden. Upon seeing this, the old woman also followed in and left behind a sentence, "Don't let them off." Leaving behind that roaring ferocious beast, she swaggered off. Mu Roxuan was so angry that her heart and lungs were about to explode. She could only attack the tiger with Mu Ziwei and the other elite disciples to save the Mu family disciples. Little Mississippi, the one-eyed old woman, was silent as she tottered after Arbor's footsteps. She still couldn't suppress her agitation. "Little Miss, you must be Little Miss, right? Someone who had such a similar temperament and appearance to her miss must be Miss's biological daughter." At this moment, Arbor felt a little emotional. So the place she accidentally came to was the courtyard where her mother, Long Chuyun, used to live. More than 10 years had passed, but the scenery remained the same. The entire house was shrouded in dense yin qi. From the outside, it looked like a haunted house. If she did not mention it, no one in the Mu family would remember that Long Chuyun was once the mistress of the Mu family. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The little white squirrel tugged at Arbor's belt and crawled into her arms. The old woman's eyes suddenly stared blankly as she pointed at the little white squirrel in Arbor's arms. She could not help but exclaim in surprise and joy, "Bye-bye, White Emperor! But you, White Emperor! White Emperor!" Arbor was slightly taken aback. Judging from the woman's expression, she clearly recognized the little white squirrel in her arms. Aba's mind turned, and a trace of doubt flashed across his brows. Could it be that this little white squirrel was related to his mother? She seemed to have grasped something in her heart, and a lightning-like inspiration flashed through her mind. Her entire person was completely stunned. White Emperor. The old woman revealed a pleasantly surprised and sad expression. I never thought that I would be able to see you again in my lifetime, White Emperor. You said you were called Chan Kwong? Ah, yes, Little Mississippi. This old servant is called Chan Kwong, your mother's personal wet nurse. See you tomorrow. Chapter 26:51. Aba pursed his lips slightly, and looked at the old mama in front of him with a heavy gaze. Chen Kuei. Yes, this old servant is here. You, ever since mother left you. Have you been guarding here? Yes. Chen Kuei nodded his head excitedly, and couldn't help but tear up. This old servant knew that Miss would definitely come back. Little Miss, where is Miss? Aba's heart was slightly sour. His eyes focused on the old woman in front of him who had a hunched back, one of her eyes revealing a strong sense of expectation. His heart was suddenly touched. Aba suppressed the bitter feeling in his heart, and slightly clenched his fists. All these years, you've never gone out? You've always been in this house? Yes. Therefore, if she wasn't moved by the little white squirrel today, she would have walked to this house by herself. Chen Kuei, who was isolated from the world, would not know that she had returned to the Mu family. Little Miss, this old servant was isolated from the world in this wind-chasing garden, and actually did not know that Little Miss and Miss had returned. Chan Kuei said with red eyes, It was this old servant's negligence. It was this old servant. Chen Kuei suddenly wanted to kneel down. Aba hurriedly took a step forward, held her arms, and tightly held her hands. Chen Kuei, you won't be able to wait for mother anymore. The little girl's voice was slightly cold and very low. However, Chen Kuei felt as if a heavy hammer had ruthlessly smashed her head. She was completely stunned all of a sudden. She stiffly stood there, staring at Aba with red eyes, and her body could not help but slightly tremble. Is it what this old servant means? Chen Kuei's eyes were quickly filled with tears as he asked with a trembling voice. Under the little girl's expressionless face, there was a turbulent heart. Yes. She coldly and firmly replied with a single word. Chen Kuei staggered, as if all of his aura had been sucked out of his body, and he suddenly wanted to fall backwards. Aba grabbed her arm and helped her sit down on a stone stool at the side. Her eyes were red, and she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Silence. Aba squatted in front of the old woman. Looking at her white hair and wrinkled face, his heart ached. Such an old woman had been guarding this haunted house all this time, waiting for her mother to return. She didn't know what kind of emotion this was. Miss is dead? Chen Yi was still not sure as he asked with a trembling voice. Aba's eyes were red as he nodded expressionlessly. Why? Chen Yi murmured, how did such a powerful person like Miss die? She suddenly thought of something and stared at the little white squirrel in Aba's arms. Ask White Emperor. White Emperor will definitely know. However, the little white squirrel's furry face was filled with confusion. Xiao Mu hugged the little squirrel's plump body tightly, so much so that the little white squirrel could feel it, squeezing it so tightly that it almost couldn't breathe. Startled Swan Dagger. 3,000 kills. Super strong beast. His body is sturdy, and his strength can move mountains and rivers. It's shaped like a large rat and has 13 huge tails. Each of them has the ability to split a mountain. One man and one beast, fighting alone, annihilated more than 9,000 people from Shuntian Hall. In the Battle of the Western Wilderness, Senior's name has spread throughout the world. As Xiao Mu slowly recited, tears finally streamed down her face. It turned out that her mother had already sent her super-strong war beast to her side. Chapter 26:52. It turned out that the little white squirrel beside her was the battle beast that accompanied her mother to fight against the Shuntian Prefecture's bandits in the western wilderness. The mother and daughter had an inexplicable fate. But she was completely unaware. Chen Cheng looked at her with red eyes. She didn't understand what little miss was mumbling about, but she felt uncomfortable with her heart being grabbed. It was as if an invisible giant palm was tightly gripping her heart. Just listening to it made her feel very painful. Very painful. Very painful. Little miss, can you tell me what's going on? Although Long Chuyun is dead, her legend has been circulating on Sikong Planet for more than 10 years, Arbor said faintly. Sikong Planet? Miss went to the lower star field? Chen Cheng, do you know why she left the Mu family back then? Of course I know. Chen Cheng gnashed her teeth and said hatefully, it was those ungrateful bastards who were worse than pigs and dogs that forced her to leave. Tell me, Chen Cheng. I will definitely seek justice for mother, Arbor said coldly. Chen Cheng turned to look at her and reached out to grab her little hand. Little miss, you must not try to strike a stone with an egg by yourself. I'm not alone. When Arbor said this, a faint gentleness flitted across her face. I'm not alone anymore. Chen Cheng, don't worry. I won't take risks if I'm not sure. Good, good, good. Seeing her so confident, the old woman's expression couldn't help but ease a little. She quickly nodded and said, what does little miss want to know? This old servant will definitely tell you everything. Mama, back then, after my mother left the divine continent alone, she went to the lower star field. He went to the lower star field, but he was hunted down all the way. Shuntian Prefecture once sent 10,000 people to kill her in the western wilderness of the lower star field. At that time, she relied on the startling swan dagger to fight alone. She killed 9,000 people from Shuntian Prefecture before finally escaping. Now that he thought about it, the place she escaped to was Kwoto village near Hulun Mountain. Although she won this battle, her vitality was greatly damaged after all. Therefore, not long after giving birth to her, Long Chuyun divined that she would not live for long. Entrusting the orphan, building the land of inheritance, and silently dying in that place alone. Everything became logical and traceable. As for the little white squirrel, it was indeed unknown why it had run from Long Chuyun's land of inheritance to the Peach Garden Mystic Realm. The Peach Garden Mystic Realm was naturally formed. It was unknown how the white squirrel had managed to enter it. The white squirrel had been severely injured in that battle. Now, it only had 4 of its 13 tails. Clearly, it had been on the brink of death in that battle. From the very first glance, it had already latched onto him. It was definitely following the aura of his bloodline. Arbor's little hand unconsciously grabbed the furry little squirrel that was obediently nestled in his arms, not moving at all. Chen Yi's eyes were about to split open as he clenched his fists tightly. As expected, they are all a bunch of ambitious wolves. The information I have now is, Shuntian Manor's Manor Lord, Gung Pengcheng, was related to Concubine Shi. But I don't know if it was that Concubine Shi who gave the order to kill my mother. Concubine Shi. Chen Yi's face darkened slightly. She's just a little concubine. How did she get involved with Shuntian Manor? I also feel a little puzzled. Arbor lowered his eyes and said indifferently, so, Mama, I want to know why Mother left alone back then. Chapter 2653. I want to find the source. I will definitely be able to find the truth. I will definitely be able to find the murderer who killed her. Little miss, come with me. Chen Kuei nodded and turned around to lead Arbor into the 2-story building. They went all the way to the 2nd floor and pushed open a door. Your mother used to live here. The furnishings in the room were very simple. It could be seen that Long Chuyun was not a person who paid much attention to details. So many years had passed, but the room was still clean and spotless. It could be seen how diligent Chen Kuei was in cleaning. Little miss, sit. Chen Kuei invited Arbor to sit down. From the dressing table at the side, he picked up a well-made and meticulously carved rosewood box and came to Arbor's side. Pushing the box to Aber's side, Chan Kuei sighed and said, "This is your mother's relic. Little miss, you should keep it well." Aber opened the box and looked inside. It was full of pearls and jade jewelry, which looked a little dazzling. There was also a compartment in the box. Aber opened it and saw that it was a list of dowry. Glancing down 10 lines at a glance, Aber looked up at Chan Kuei. "These things are all mother's? Your mother left them for you. In the future, they will all be your dowry. Including this Kai Dai pavilion, frustrated pavilion, and so on, they are all mother's businesses." "Yes." Chan Kuei opened the last compartment of the box, took out a stack of land deeds, and handed it to Aber. "A few years ago, Master came to ask for it, but I didn't give it to him." Chen Kuei sneered. "At that time, when Master and I fought, I, a blind old woman, would have risked my life to protect Mrs. Things." "Your eyes?" Aber was startled, and her fingers slightly shrank. "That's not it. My eyes were not blinded by Master." Chen Kuei shook her head. "Little miss, don't worry. I have the Scarlet Flame Fire Spitting Tiger, so I didn't suffer too much. I was injured, and Master was also injured. After that, he even sealed the road here and made Chasing Wind Garden a forbidden area for the Mu family. But this is also good. This way, there will be fewer people coming to make a fuss." Chen Kuei laughed mockingly. "However, although the deeds are in our hands, those shops and fields are all managed by the Mu family." Aber nodded. "It's okay. Take your time. It's mine. I won't lose a single thing." Seeing that Little Miss's attitude was so resolute, Chan Yi's eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. She didn't know why, but although she had only interacted with Little Miss for a short while, she felt that as long as Little Miss said something, she would definitely be able to do it. Did Little Miss come into contact with anyone from the imperial capital's Long family after coming to the Divine Land? Aber shook her head. The matter of going to the Long family to collect the debt was handled by eunuch Chen. She didn't need to do it herself. A trace of coldness flashed past Chan Kuei's eyes. "Little miss, if you meet people from the Long family in the future, don't be courteous to them. The reason why your mother left the Mu family back then was also because of the Long family's influence." Aber was a little confused. "Isn't the Long family mother's family? What kind of family is that?" "The Divine Continent's imperial capital's Long family is just a small branch family. Their bloodline is already very far away from the Long family's main family." A trace of disdain flashed past Chan Kuei's eyes. Aber blinked. "Then where is my mother's family?" "The Sea of Forgetfulness." Chen Kuei's eyes carried a faint yearning. "Our home is in the Sea of Forgetfulness." Chapter 2654. The entire sea area is the Long family's territory, above the 3 provinces. The current lord is your uncle, Long Chuyu. Aber blinked, but before she could ask any questions, she heard Chan Kuei continue. "More than 10 years ago, the imperial capital's Long family led a group of greedy people to the Sea of Forgetfulness to attack our home, wanting to plunder our resources. Although they didn't succeed in the end, the Sea of Forgetfulness suffered a great deal of damage. Our clansmen also suffered countless casualties, and in the end, all of them went into seclusion." Aba's heart skipped a beat, and she stared at Chan Kuei expressionlessly. She felt that she seemed to have grasped some important information, and it flashed through her mind like a bolt of lightning. After your mother found out, she naturally wouldn't let it go. She gathered a group of forces under her and wanted to go to war with the imperial capital's Long family. Who knew that at this time, your father would actually drag her down? Together with the Mu family's elders, they strongly urged her to stop all her actions. They wanted your mother to swallow this anger alive. Your mother was forced by all of them. If they wanted to make a move against the imperial capital's Long family, they wanted her to leave the Mu family and not call herself a member of the Mu family. Those cowards didn't want to go against the Long family, the Gu family, and a few other families. They were afraid of becoming the target of public criticism. They were scared to death. Chan Kuei's hands clenched tightly, and she fiercely clenched them together. Miss couldn't bear this anger, and in a fit of anger, she really left the Mu family. The most ridiculous thing was that this news was tightly suppressed after that. Other than your father and a few elders who knew about it, even the old patriarch who was in seclusion didn't know the reason at first. It wasn't until after he came out of seclusion that the old patriarch personally came to ask me, and I told him the truth. Only then did he feel ashamed and began to send people everywhere to look for you and your mother. At that time, your mother was condemned by everyone. Everyone said that your mother abandoned her husband and children and left the Mu family on her own because she didn't know filial piety, familial love, etiquette, justice, integrity, and shame. But who could understand your mother's pain? At that time, she was worried about your uncle and the others. She watched as her childhood home was destroyed by a group of bandits. How could she live in peace? Chen Yi gritted his teeth and said, "Your father is really not a good person. Little miss, you don't know. Your uncle and the others weren't able to participate in the elders' secret meeting at that time. They simply didn't know why your mother left the Mu family by herself." Chapter 2655. Know manners and abide by the rules? Auber ruminated these words. Nanny couldn't have forgotten, right? Mu Rochuan, this eldest miss, is a few months older than me. She wasn't someone who knew her place, right? Otherwise, how could Mu Rochuan have been born before her? This Mu Qingya must have gotten together with Mu Jingfeng behind her mother's back without a proper reason. Chen Kuei stared blankly, then pulled Auber's hand and said, "Little miss, I also know a little about this matter. You really can't blame Qingya. She's been the Mu family's adopted daughter since she was young. She can't open her mystic meridians and has no cultivation, so her life in the Mu family is very difficult. Fortunately, although she looks soft, she's actually a resolute and courageous woman. Usually, no one can bully her. She's very headstrong. Ever since your father married your mother, she cut the Gordian knot and stopped fooling around with your father. If it weren't for your father, that bastard, provoking an enemy and being drugged, hurriedly barging into Qingya's court and raping her without a care, how could he have harmed Qingya's entire life? She hasn't had a good time these years. She's worked like a horse for the Mu family for so many years, conscientiously helping your father take care of those shops, fields, and so on. She even has to raise concubines for your father. If it were your mother, she would have quit 180 years ago." Auber coldly snorted. Chen Kuei continued, "Little miss, it's not that this old servant wants to speak ill of your father. This old servant feels that the one who sent people from Shuntian Prefecture to kill your mother is most likely that cowardly father of yours. He's an extremely conceited person. Your mother dared to directly leave the Mu family and didn't give him any face. He must have harbored a grudge in his heart and thought of a way to get rid of your mother." Auber inwardly analyzed Chen Kuei's words and felt that what she said made some sense. Perhaps it really was her father's doing. Her father could casually throw out a few talismans or give out a few bottles of top-grade pills, and there would be plenty of people rushing to do things for him, right? "I understand," Auber said indifferently. "Whether it's the Long family, Mu Qingya, or Mu Jingfeng, I'll get to the bottom of it." Chen Kuei looked at Auber with a gratified expression and nodded. "If Miss is in heaven, she will definitely be happy." Auber couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Mother won't be too happy. After all, her original intention was not to involve her in these matters. She only wanted her to live the rest of her life peacefully and comfortably. However, she still got involved." Auber looked deeply at Chen Kuei. "Mama, the Long family of the Sea of Forgetfulness you mentioned, is it the family that I am thinking of?" Chen Kuei could not help but be startled. He looked at Auber and then laughed. "Little miss already has an idea in her heart, isn't that so?" Auber sighed. He felt that a lot of his doubts had been resolved. It turned out that she actually had such a strange bloodline. It was truly amazing. No wonder she could feel that she could breathe freely and smoothly every time she entered the water. It was as if she was a fish in water. At this moment, she recalled Long Chiyun's last words when he took her in as a disciple. She couldn't help but feel a bit enlightened. Arbor shook his head emotionally. He looked at Chen Kuei and said softly, "Mama, come back to Yulon Court with me." Chen Kuei's old face that was full of wrinkles revealed a deep smile. "This old servant is willing to follow little miss, and will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire." Who wants you to go through water and tread on fire? Arbor thought. She wanted her to live a comfortable life. Chapter 2656. Chen Kuei said that she needed to pack her things and then she would go to Yulon Court by herself. Arbor thought that since she had lived here for so long, she must have a lot of memories. Naturally, she had to say goodbye. After leaving Chasing Wind Garden, Xiao Mu looked back at the courtyard that was as dilapidated as a haunted house and narrowed her eyes. Back then, when her mother left the Mu family in a fit of anger, it actually involved some secrets of her maternal family. As a branch family, the Long family of the capital was willing to betray their own family members for some benefits. It must have been hard for them to live so well in the capital all these years. This karmic retribution really needed to be personally handled by her. When Arbor arrived at North Garden, it was already past lunchtime. When the old steward of North Garden saw that it was the little crown princess, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly welcomed her into the main room and then went to invite the old patriarch over. Since Mu Tsang was waiting for his little granddaughter to come over to talk, he naturally wouldn't go into seclusion. Therefore, when the old steward came to report, he immediately went out of his room and hurried to the main room. Soon, Madame Gong arrived. Old Man Mu could see the little girl's cold figure from afar. She was sitting upright on the wooden armchair in the main room, her little face tense. He couldn't tell from her expression that she was happy or angry. He couldn't tell if she was happy or angry. Old Man Mu coughed softly and strolled into the room. He said with a smile, "Jojo, you're here to see Grandpa." Arbor nodded. "Where's the compensation? Don't tell me you haven't prepared it yet." Old Man Mu's mouth twitched. He felt that when the little girl said this, her expression was very calm. It was as if she had talked about the compensation with people countless times. "The compensation will be paid. It's all ready." Old Man Mu coughed softly and hurriedly turned to stride out. "Come, Jojo, with me." Arbor stood up expressionlessly and followed Old Man Mu out. They went to an open space behind the house and saw that it was full of supplies. Looking at the situation, it was indeed a lot more than the first time. The little fellow's mood finally improved a little. He nodded and said, It's pretty good. Move aside and let me collect it." The old man quickly nodded and took a step back. When he saw the little girl take out 4 or 5 blue storage talismans and toss them into the sky, he was shocked. The old man's eyes suddenly widened. What was going on? Since when did blue storage talismans become cabbages that could be found everywhere? Arbor's profound level storage talismans made of ebony had a storage space of over 100 cubic meters. 4 or 5 storage talismans were more than enough to store the items in front of him. However, such a large sum of money shocked the old man who was standing at the side. Jojo hadn't taken out the purple jade talisman to scare people yet. These were the blue talismans that he had drawn in the past that were unused. He gave them to her to use first. Old Master Lin stared at them without blinking for a while. He stepped forward excitedly and carefully sized up the talismans that were suspended in mid-air. This is... Old Master Lin pointed at them with trembling fingers. "This is a profound level storage talisman?" The talisman power attached to it was indeed of the profound level. Heavens, why did this little fellow have so many blue storage talismans? In the entire talisman family, there were only 19 storage talismans that had been successfully made. It was just one blue storage talisman. Chapter 2657. Moreover, the highest level blue storage talisman was only yellow level. It was made by a grand elder 100 years ago. Although the method of drawing the blue talisman had been passed down, none of his descendants had been able to make the blue storage talisman. Grandpa Mu looked at Arbor in surprise and delight. "Jojo, Are these black-level blue storage talismans? Abba glanced at Grandpa Moo and thought for a moment. Then, he took out 2 blue storage talismans from his pocket and tossed them to Grandpa Moo. Courtesy demands reciprocity. The corners of Old Master Moo's mouth twitched. He had the urge to laugh, but he felt gratified in his heart. Who said that his granddaughter was ignorant of the ways of the world and only knew how to maintain a poker face? Wasn't she very sensible? Jojo, these blue storage talismans are? You drew them? Grandpa Moo was too embarrassed to ask. He only probed with his eyes. Yes. Abba nodded his little head. I drew them. I drew them, I drew them, I drew them. Drew them, drew them, drew them. These words kept reverberating in Grandpa Moo's mind. They reverberated back and forth, almost as loud as the sound of magic. His calm old face gradually rippled with strangeness and astonishment. Then, his expression froze in shock. Could it be that his ears weren't working well? Could it be that he was hallucinating? When he heard that his eldest granddaughter, Mu Roxuan, had drawn a high-level yellow storage talisman at Weishi Langfang, he was so happy that he almost couldn't speak. Roxuan was the only junior in the Mu family who could draw a storage talisman in recent years. Grandpa Moo was very gratified when he thought that Roxuan's future as a talisman master might be even better than Xing Chen. But now, Ro Xian was nothing compared to the little girl in front of him. This little girl actually told him that she drew all the black-level blue storage talismans in front of him? Grandpa Moo was abnormally shocked. He was stunned by this news. That was a black-level blue storage talisman. Even the ancestors of the talisman aristocratic families in China had never drawn a talisman like that. The little girl looked at the old man with a strange expression. She saw that he was so agitated by the news that his mouth opened and closed, unable to speak. Abba couldn't help but shove the 2 storage talismans into the old man's hands. He said expressionlessly, "Take it." Subconsciously, Grandpa Moo clutches the blue storage amulet in his hand. The little fellow asked Patriarch Moo to sit down at the stone table beside them. Then she sat down and said seriously, "Patriarch Moo, let's talk business now." Old Master Moo was stunned. When he heard her address him as Old Patriarch Moo, his mood stagnated a little, and he looked a little depressed. It seemed that the little guy still couldn't admit his grandfather's identity. But thinking about it, they had not known each other for more than 10 years. Who would be able to accept it so quickly? Don't worry, there's still a long way to go, the old man thought to himself. He would first slowly get to know the little fellow and let her guard down. If he treated her well, she would definitely be willing to call him grandfather in the future. Child, tell me. If this old man can make a decision, I will definitely help you. Grandpa Moo nodded. The little girl took out the dowry list from the pear blossom wooden box and placed it in front of Grandpa Moo. My mother's dowry is said to be for me. Patriarch, pass down the order to have Mu Jingfeng prepare the accounts and show me the profits over the years. Chapter 2658. The old man's mouth twitched fiercely. Great. His granddaughter's move was truly ruthless. The old man's eyelids twitched as he reached out to take the long list of dowry. He looked at it line by line, and the more he looked, the more black lines appeared on his forehead. Let's not talk about the other fields and shops. Just the 3 prosperous shops on Changle Street, the Kai-Dai Pavilion, the Frustrated Pavilion, and the Precious Painting Workshop. The little girl wanted to see the profits over the years and the account books. This was the highlight. The old man could almost imagine the boss jumping up and down immediately. He silently glanced at the little girl. The little girl's face was stoic as she expressionlessly said, "Old clan head, if you can't persuade Mu Jingfeng, then I can't do anything about it. I can only drag husband to beg his majesty in tears. After all, there are so many properties, but I haven't seen a single cent, so it's not very justifiable." The old man's mouth twitched again. His little granddaughter was clearly using peaceful means before resorting to force and threatening him. If his daughter-in-law's dowry was really brought up in front of His Majesty, that would truly be embarrassing. In any case, that's how it is. The little girl indifferently said, I'm not in a hurry either. It'll be fine to sort out the account books and profits within 5 days. You can decide what Mu Jingfeng wants to say on his side. The old man's forehead was filled with black lines. He inwardly thought, it's only been 5 days, and you want to sort out all the things from the past years, yet you say you're not in a hurry? However, he wasn't stupid. He naturally knew that the father and daughter had a deep knot in their hearts. The little girl was clearly not giving Jingfeng a good life by doing this. The eldest branch had lived such a prosperous and carefree life these past few years. If they had to spit out so much at once, the Mu family's old man himself didn't dare to imagine it. The little girl patted her butt and went back in a good mood. She had said what needed to be said. As for whether they would do it or not, that was their business. Doing things obediently was one thing, but if they didn't, then it was a different story. In any case, she had a backup plan waiting for them. On the other side, in the Imperial Palace's Grand Hall, the air was so oppressive that one could practically hear a pin drop. Ever since the Crown Prince was summoned to the hall, the atmosphere gradually became heavy and frightening. The officials silently lowered their heads like quails, increasingly feeling that the atmosphere here was very stifling. After the Crown Prince went to the rear, he merely looked at everyone with a cold gaze and didn't say anything. This inexplicable pressure caused everyone to shut their mouths. Not speaking for a long time caused everyone's hearts to be hung high, filled with endless tension and oppression. Cough. Finally, someone couldn't take it anymore and coughed dryly. A man in a white robe standing in the middle of the Heaven Origin main hall stepped forward and cupped his hands. Your Majesty, if you want to talk about punishment, the holy nun of my Heaven Origin hall has suffered a lot while being locked up in the dungeon. She has also received the lesson she deserves. I wonder if your Majesty can... Nie Yaoguang led a group of disciples of the Divine Hall to slander, spread rumors, and abuse the Crown Princess in public. His crime is serious. You want to release him after 5 or 6 days. What do you think Shenzhou is? How can you be so presumptuous? Prince Mo finally opened his mouth. The moment he opened his mouth, he was merciless and angry. His eyes were so cold that it seemed like they were about to drop ice shards. The white-robed priest turned and bowed. Your Highness, Yao Guang Saintess, she... Olian didn't listen to him. She waved her hand and said coldly, I don't agree to let him go. Crown Prince, you... presumptuous. Eunuch who scolded. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Chapter 2659. The white-robed priest took a step back with a rather displeased expression, the corners of his mouth twitching as if he wanted to say something. There were about a dozen disciples of the Sun Moon Temple standing in the Qian Yuan Hall, led by an old man in brocade. At this time, the old man took a step forward and bowed to Emolian, then turned to the great emperor and said, just as our silver-ranked priest said, the saintess slandered the crown princess on the street. It is indeed her fault. But after so many days, the punishment she has received should be enough. I ask the great emperor to let the saintess out for the sake of the good relationship between our temple and the divine continent. The great emperor pursed his lips and said nothing. No one could figure out what the great emperor was thinking at this moment. The silver-ranked priest could not help but say angrily, I heard that our saintess was beaten up by the crown princess on the street. The silver-ranked priest used the word beaten. It was obvious that he was somewhat unable to suppress his anger. Thinking about it, the dignified saintess of the Sun Moon Temple, who represented the dignity of the temple, was beaten up like a dog by the divine continent's crown princess on the first day of her arrival in the capital. They had all heard that on that day, the crown princess very viciously slapped the saintess dozens of times, and finally took out the spiritual thunder talisman to kill many priests of the temple. This little crown princess was too vengeful. The saintess only committed the crime of speaking. Was there a need to be so ruthless? The most important news they heard was that the crown prince was actually an accomplice to the evildoer, allowing his concubine to do whatever she wanted and humiliate their saintess. It was really intolerable. The silver-ranked priest stood up with righteous indignation and said in a cold voice, Your Highness the Crown Prince, His Majesty the Emperor of the Divine Continent, The saintess of our Sun-Moon Temple represents the existence of the Sun-Moon and the heavenly Tao, and is the holy source of the temple. These days, your divine continent has beaten her, imprisoned her, and humiliated her. This is already very infuriating. Now that our temple has proposed the terms of exchange, shouldn't you also take a step back? Isn't it a little unreasonable to refuse to let him go? Prince Emo looked at the priest coldly. Release them. Stop dreaming. Since this woman dares to slander my wife, then she can stay in prison for the rest of her life. The white silver priest's expression changed slightly, and he couldn't help but blurt out, Your Highness, can you make a decision on this matter? There was a hint of disdain in his words. If you can't make the decision, then shut up. The great emperor hadn't said anything yet. The silver-ranked priest sneered. The hall was silent, and all the officials lowered their heads in an instant. Prince Emo looked at him with a cold smile. His voice was neither loud nor soft, but it was cold enough to make people shiver. This person disobeyed this crown prince in front of everyone, so his crime is punishable by death. Where are the guards? Here. Dozens of Purple Forest guards rushed in from the entrance of the hall, and surrounded the silver-ranked priest who had been blabbering non-stop the moment he entered the hall. Dozens of swords pressed down on the priest's neck, and he was forced to kneel on the ground with his hands behind his back. The silver-ranked priest's knees went soft, and he fell heavily on the ground. His entire face turned green, and he was sweating profusely. He hurriedly said, Great Emperor, what is the meaning of this? Chapter 2660. The Crown Prince is treating me like this. Are you not going to do anything about it? The Emperor of the Divine Prefecture looked at him coldly. He sat on the throne, looking coldly at this audacious silver-ranked priest. A little priest of the Sun-Moon Temple dares to be so rude to the Crown Prince. The Emperor's voice was as cold as ice. He reached out to touch his forehead and subconsciously hit his aching head. He waved his hand in annoyance. Go, bring me the bucket of bliss. The faces of the courtiers suddenly turned pale and ugly. A few timid courtiers were already standing in the back row, their bodies swaying as if they were on the verge of collapsing. Emolien knitted his brows and looked up at the son of the divine province sitting above. He had no idea what the barrel of bliss his father was talking about was. But looking at the courtiers' panicked expressions, it was obviously not something good. Soon, eunuch who directed 4 young eunuchs with pale faces to bring up a pitch-black wooden barrel that was as tall as a person. Dong! The wooden barrel landed on the ground, heavy as if it landed on everyone's hearts. They could not help but feel their hearts skip a beat. They felt an inexplicable sense of fear. At this moment, the entire hall was completely silent. Not a single sound could be heard. The silver-ranked priest seemed to feel something was wrong. His figure under the Purple Forest Guard could not help but tremble. He hurriedly begged for mercy. My respected Emperor, I have no intention of looking down on the divine prefecture. Please understand. I have no intention of disobeying His Highness the Crown Prince. Don't talk nonsense with him. The Emperor felt a headache coming on. He waved his hand and said angrily, Come, let the silver-ranked priest enjoy the world of bliss. Prince Kong, who was standing in the front row, raised his eyelids. He could not help but look up from the corner of his eyes. Prince Jian Pain, who was on the left, could not help but tremble. He took a step back. Emolien did not know what was going on. She watched as the crowd rushed forward and pulled the silver-ranked priest up. The silver-ranked priest kept crying with a pale face. Guardian Steward, save me, save me, save me. The old man in embroidered robes from the Sun-Moon Temple immediately reacted. He hurriedly stepped forward and shouted, Your Majesty, please calm down, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, you can't do that. Your Majesty. The great Emperor's face was cold. He didn't care about what the old man was saying. He stared coldly at the pitiful silver-ranked priest and said coldly, No one can despise my son in front of me. The white silver priest of Sun Moon Temple was drenched in cold sweat. He screamed and begged for mercy. Your Majesty, please spare my life, Your Majesty. Your Highness the Crown Prince, Your Highness the Crown Prince asks for your forgiveness. Guardian Steward, save me. Just as the old man took a step forward, a dozen purple forest guards pointed their swords at his chest. For a time, the atmosphere in the main hall revealed a state of mutual hostility. Emolien's face was cold and indifferent. She looked at everything as if she was an outsider. After the barrel of bliss was opened, the silver-ranked priest was immediately thrown in like trash. Soon, the entire Qian Yuan hall was filled with the priest's exaggerated and painful screams. Chapter 2661. No. Save me. Most of the priests in the Sun Moon Temple were ordinary people, and this silver priest's cultivation was only at level 6 mystic cultivator realm. Although the officials on both sides didn't know what this priest was going through, they felt terrified just by hearing his screams. Everyone subconsciously took a few steps back. Emolien looked on coolly from the sidelines as a young eunuch picked up the bucket lid. His trembling body barely supported himself as he closed the bucket lid again. Qianyuan Hall fell into a deathly silence. Apart from the rustling sound of something crawling and biting in the barrel of bliss, the silver priest's screams faded bit by bit until they completely disappeared. The old officials were sweating profusely, and they were all about to cry. They knew that their emperor was very temperamental, but in recent years, the emperor's temper had really been restrained a lot. They didn't expect that such a terrifying scene would suddenly occur in the imperial court. Apart from being terrified, everyone's fear of His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly increased. Sure enough, father and son were father and son. The son's methods were vicious, but the father was even more vicious. Moreover, the emperor didn't seem to allow anyone to have any disrespect to the Crown Prince at all. Everyone was aware of this point and reminded themselves in their hearts, don't court death in front of His Highness the Crown Prince. Their emperor might go berserk at any time. The silver priest in front of them was their example, so they must remember this. Jianping Wang wiped the cold sweat on his head and secretly glanced at the expressionless Crown Prince standing to the side. He felt even more stifled. As expected of the emperor's biological son, even this indifferent expression was almost the same. The Sun Moon Temple's embroidered elder clenched his fists tightly and forcibly suppressed his gushing anger. He tried to speak in a calm voice. The silver priest offended His Highness the Crown Prince of Guizhou, so he deserved more than death. But the holy nun is the symbol of our temple. I hope that Your Majesty will show mercy and magnanimity to spare her this time. The embroidered elder lowered his noble head and said indifferently, whatever compensation you want, please feel free to state it. As long as the temple can do it, we will definitely not refuse. The great emperor looked at the Crown Prince. What do you think, Crown Prince? I don't agree to release him. It was still the same sentence and the same cold expression. The embroidered-robed old man clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. For a long time, there was no sound in the hall. The embroidered-robed elder took a few deep breaths before trying his best to calm his voice. I know that the sage nun did something wrong and offended the Crown Princess. In that case, I wonder if we can invite Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort to come here? On behalf of the Sun Moon Temple, this old man is willing to offer a sincere apology to the Crown Princess and ask for her forgiveness. The courtiers wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads. He felt that the situation was developing in a strange direction. Was the Sun Moon Temple trying to court death again? If they thought that the little Crown Princess was easier to deal with, then they were gravely mistaken. The great emperor didn't say anything, but looked at his son again. Prince Mo's expression was indifferent as he stood ramrod straight in front of the hall. He swept a disdainful glance at the embroidered-robed elder. What right do you have to say that you can see the Crown Princess whenever you want? Chapter 2662. The Crown Prince consort doesn't have that much free time to listen to you people's nonsense. Hearing the Crown Prince's words, everyone wanted to ridicule him in their hearts. What was the Crown Princess busy with? She had just returned to the Mu family. What could she be busy with? She didn't have so much free time. She was just a little girl. At most she would return to the Mu family to cultivate. What could she be busy with? The old man in embroidered clothes was the protector of the Sun Moon Temple. At this time, he also had a headache. His Highness the Crown Prince stubbornly refused to let go, and looking at the situation today, the great Emperor would definitely not go against the Crown Prince's wishes. He couldn't help but take a long breath. Respectfully bowing to His Highness the Crown Prince, he said in the most sincere tone and attitude, "I hope your Highness can allow it. Sun Moon Temple is making this request with utmost sincerity." Putting down his pride and pleading like this was already the custodian's bottom line. He couldn't think of any other way to plead the Crown Prince to relent. Since the Crown Prince's path couldn't be taken, it was best to see the Crown Princess and take another path from her. Now he had nothing else to ask for. As long as the Saintess of the Temple was released, he could basically agree to any suitable conditions. Emolien's eyes, without a trace of warmth, swept across the face of the protector of the Sun Moon Temple. She lowered her eyes and sneered. For a moment, the old man in embroidered clothes felt as if his chest was being pressed by something, and he couldn't breathe. After a long while, the Crown Prince raised his hand slightly, and a purple figure turned and walked out of the hall. The protector of the Sun Moon Temple looked at the Crown Prince with a complicated expression, and his heart couldn't help but tighten slightly. His Highness the Crown Prince of the Great Divine Continent, who had just returned, although he hadn't lived in the Divine Continent for a long time, the power of a superior was frightening. "Long time no see, my Chow parting line. Kai Xiu, I'm back." The little Crown Princess returned to Yulon Court from the North Courtyard in a good mood. Hearing the voice, Kai Xiu and Kai Chi hurriedly ran out from the side room. "Crown Princess, you're back." Kai Xiu could not hide the worry in her eyes as she sized her up. Earlier on, they had already heard that the little Crown Princess had a conflict with the Mu clan's disciples in Chasing Wind Garden. They were worried about it, so they sent someone over to check on her. They did not expect the little Crown Princess to return so quickly. Kai Chi's face was full of joy as she held a plate of pastries in her hands. She smiled at Auber and said, "Crown Princess, you came back just in time. These pastries are freshly made. Do you want to try one?" The little Crown Princess's eyes curved slightly. Just as she was about to nod in agreement, her expression suddenly changed slightly. She shouted at the two of them, "Get down!" Kai Chi and Kai Xiu were both startled. Then, they instinctively squatted down on the ground. They felt as if something had swept over their heads. It was accompanied by a fierce roar. The plate in Kai Xiu's hand shattered and fell to the ground. The thing that pounced over suddenly turned its head. A pair of scarlet eyes revealed traces of bloodthirst as it stared fiercely at Kai Chi, who was trembling all over. Without waiting for that guy to make a move, Auber had already rushed forward. She had already summoned a ferule in her hand, and without any explanation, a blue spiritual pure fire burned over. The raging fire suddenly wrapped around the figure that was about to pounce on him. A sharp roar resounded in everyone's ears for a long time. Kai Xiu and Kai Chi both covered their heads and lay on the ground. At this time, they couldn't hide the horror in their eyes as they turned their heads. Chapter 2663. The person in front of them gave them a huge shock. How was this still a person? The facial features on her face were already so distorted that it was almost impossible to distinguish her original appearance. In addition, her entire body was covered with blue veins, and the skin on her hands and body could clearly be seen bulging out like earthworms. Auber's pupils slightly shrank. The development of corpse puppets to this day could be said to have completely surpassed what she had seen and experienced in her previous life. This should be a high-level corpse puppet, and judging from its battle strength, it should be above level 2. Her speed, strength, and actual combat ability could already be compared to a level 14 or 15 Great Spirit Master. Auber took a deep breath, and subconsciously clenched her two small fists tightly. Just now, if she hadn't reacted extremely quickly and made Kai Xiu and Kai Chi lie down, the two girls would definitely have been scratched. Two fresh lives would have withered and withered in front of her eyes. Unforgivable. Arba suddenly rushed forward, and with a stretch of her hand, the blue flames wrapped around the corpse puppet's body burned even more fiercely. "Crown Princess, be careful!" Kai Xiu cried out in alarm. At the side, Kai Chi also came back to her senses, and carefully looked at the corpse puppet, and couldn't help but whisper, "It's little Xing, this strange person is little Xing, don't go near her." Arba simply didn't remember who this little Xing was. In any case, in her eyes, a corpse puppet wasn't a person. The ferrule in her hand flew out, and fell on the corpse puppet's back with a clap. Who would have thought that the thing's head could actually turn 360 degrees, and its skull, which was originally facing her, was now faintly looking at her with two eyes that were like will-o'-the-wisps. If it were someone else, they would have been frightened by this strange thing long ago. But the little crown princess was expressionless, and directly flung out 4 or 5 attack talismans from her sleeves, mercilessly smashing them on the corpse puppet's head. Unfortunately, these few black level attack talismans were still some distance away from dealing with a level 14 or 15 Great Spirit Master. After all, those blue attack talismans had inherited more than 80% of Arba's strength, and these talismans could at most deal with a level 7 or 8 Great Spirit Master. Against a rank 3 advanced corpse puppet that was equivalent to a rank 14 or 15 Great Spirit Master, it was still a bit too weak. However, the power of these few attack talismans was naturally able to obstruct the corpse puppet. At this moment of obstruction, Xiao Mu had already pinched out a blue fireball and flung it at the zombie's head with a smack. Unexpectedly, this attack did not cause any damage to the corpse puppet at all. Instead, it angered her a little. That guy turned his head and stared at her with a pair of dead fish eyes. A very strange hissing sound came from his throat. Suddenly, the zombie's tongue stretched out from its open mouth like a tape measure. There was a disgusting sarcoma in the middle of its tongue. Xiao Mu had been concentrating on this ugly person the entire time. When she saw her pounce on her and open her mouth, she promptly shot out 7 to 8 white bone nails without any explanation. The white bone nail was Duan Yu's unique concealed weapon. The nail was white in color, slender, and had extremely strong penetrative power. Just one nail was enough to make a person wish they were dead. Moreover, each nail pierced through that monster's long tongue at close range, eliciting waves of manic roars from her. However, what terrified Kai Xiu and Kai Chi was that the crown princess had clearly shot several concealed weapons into little Xing's mouth, but she could still move? Arba narrowed his eyes, and a thought flashed through his mind. Chapter 2664. It seemed that this thing's body's toughness had increased quite a bit again. A dozen or so thin icicles drilled out of Arba's right hand. He stared coldly at this high-level zombie. The icicles abruptly shot towards the zombie's head. The zombie roared angrily and abruptly pounced forward after accumulating power. Bang! Arba raised his hand and released a crow-gold arrow at her. The icicles in his hand uniformly flew into the zombie's head. Ayo! The high-level zombie shrieked, and its body crashed to the ground uncontrollably. It still wanted to struggle? Arba had already swept up to it and ruthlessly smacked its head with his ferrule without hesitation. The rolling power of the Earth Spirit was instantly activated and smashed onto the zombie's body in an overwhelming manner. The high-level zombie was pressed to the ground, and it struggled with all its might to shake its body before pouncing with a howl. When Mu Qingya, who had rushed over after hearing the news, rushed into the Magnolia enclosure with a group of Mu family guards, she happened to see a monster baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it pounced in the little stoic's direction. In the blink of an eye, the little stoic flipped her left hand to gather the power of the Earth Spirit. She clenched her fist tightly and once again punched the charging high-level zombie. The Earth Spirit condensed into a huge stone slab and smashed down, landing on the head of the corpse hag in a frenzy. What was even more frightening was that the instant the giant stone slab smashed the zombie and shattered into pieces, A long sword condensed from the earth spirit pierced through the millions of pieces and abruptly pierced through the zombie's deformed head without warning. After the spiritual energy dissipated, only the fist-sized zombie crystal core remained on the ground, emitting a faint glow. Behind Mu Qingya, the Mu family disciples who had barged in couldn't help but narrow their pupils. Setting aside the little fellow's outburst of ruthlessness towards Mulder at the entrance of Lushing Gate. This should be the first time they witnessed the little stoic's black-hearted, ruthless, and decisive battle state. Mu Qingya hurriedly called the disciples of the Mu family in and asked with a serious face, "Chow Chow, what happened?" Arba turned to look at her. "Burn it." Mu Qingya nodded and carefully moved a few steps forward. A middle-aged man immediately walked out from behind her and stopped her. "Madam, be careful." "No, it's fine. He should be dead." Mu Qingya took 2 more steps forward and couldn't help but look at Arba. "Jojo, what the hell is this?" "This is little Xing, the girl who was sent back to Madam." Xiao Mu gazed at her and remarked apathetically, "I also want to know why she mutated into a zombie while still alive." Mu Qingya was shocked. "Zombies?" Arba nodded. "Corpse puppets can capture people and infect them with corpse poison. It will gradually turn your divine land into a land of corpses. There will be devastation everywhere, despair everywhere. Life will be filled with fear and darkness, and there will be no more light." With every few words, she took a step forward until she was right in front of Mu Qingya. She stared at her like this, and time seemed to freeze. Everyone simultaneously shuddered. They only felt that the little girl's eyes were eerie and sinister when she said this, causing fear and panic to rise in their hearts. "No, Jojo, you probably misunderstood something." Mu Qingya hastily explained with an anxious expression, "If you're talking about that girl, little Xing, I have a bit of an impression of her. Ever since you chased her out of Yulon Court, I locked her up in the woodshed." Chapter 2665. I plan to find the slave trader 2 days later and sell that lass along with a few troublesome servants. Then, I plan to buy a few clever maids and manservants. Mu Qingya hurriedly explained, I really don't know how things ended up like this." "Oh." However, Arba didn't seem to believe her and coldly swept her gaze over her. "According to what you said, you didn't care about her after throwing her into the woodshed?" Mu Qingya nodded, looking anxious and worried that explaining too much would cause Arba to be disgusted. Her fists were tightly clenched together, and her breathing was somewhat unstable. The middle-aged man behind her, Mu Liang, couldn't stand it anymore and said with a frown, "Crown Princess, Madam is in charge of the entire Mu family's affairs and has many chores every day. Xiao Xing is merely a little girl, so how could Madam keep an eye on the woodshed?" "Something must have gone wrong," Lin Feng said. Mu Liang cupped his hands and said, "If the Crown Princess trusts this subordinate, then let this subordinate go to the woodshed to investigate." This Mu Liang was her father's subordinate, so his words were rather pertinent. Arba wasn't an unreasonable person. Without any evidence, he wouldn't wrongly accuse Mu Qingya. Hearing this, he nodded. "Madam Mu, there's no need to mind. If you want to investigate, go ahead. In any case, they probably wouldn't be able to find anything. No matter who did it, they definitely wouldn't leave behind any clues." "Jojo." Mu Qingya's expression was somewhat hesitant and sad. "Actually, you can lower your guard a little and look at the people around you." "What's wrong?" Mu Xingchen quickly entered Yulon Court, followed by Mu Jingrui and Mu Jingyuan. The 3 were already on their way to Yulon Court, so when they heard such a big commotion, they immediately rushed over. Mu Qingya quickly stepped forward and took the initiative to explain the situation to the 3. Mu Xingchen and the others hurriedly stepped forward and turned Xiao Xing's body over. When they saw her strange appearance and their gazes fell on the half of her tongue that had fallen out, their hearts all trembled. How could she still be considered a person? "Mu Liang, have you searched the woodshed? This subordinate will go right away." "Jojo." Mu Xingchen walked to her side. "You must be frightened." "I'm not scared. I'm just a little annoyed." I'm a little disappointed in the Mu family, Abba said coldly. I've only lived here for a day, and 2 of my maids were almost scratched by zombies. This makes me very suspicious about the safety of your Mu family's backyard. If you don't want me to stay, you can just say so. It's not like I have to stay here, Abba said coldly. You don't have to use such underhanded means. Song Lu, Mu Qingya's maid, couldn't stand it anymore. She stood up and said angrily, Crown Princess, what do you mean by that? Mu Liang has already explained earlier, yet you still suspect our madam? It must have been difficult for madam to treat you so wholeheartedly. As soon as you moved into Yulon Court, she was busy preparing this and that for you. She was afraid that she might neglect you. Shut up. Mu Qingya reprimanded and turned to look at Arbor apologetically. Apologies, Jojo. The maid doesn't know etiquette. I hope you won't lower yourself to her level. Arbor nodded. Of course I won't bicker with her over such trivial matters. Everyone's lips twitched. You really hit the nail on the head. Chapter 2666. My 2 maids were badly frightened. Compensate them accordingly. Arbor waved his hand. If there's nothing else, please. Remember to burn this thing. Arbor's frosty eyes stared straight at Mu Qingya and the others. Don't let them come back to life again. Mu Qingya shuddered. She knew that if Xiao Xing made any more mistakes, the little crown princess would definitely pin all the blame on her as the mistress of the household. She took a deep breath. Don't worry, Jojo. I'll watch them burn it with my own eyes. Arbor nodded and turned to look at Mu Xingchen. Is there anything else? Mu Xingchen felt a bit uncomfortable when he saw that she was still keeping him at arm's length. Mother doesn't have any ill intentions towards you. Mother sincerely wants to get along well with you. If you're willing to accept others, you'll find that there are many people in this world who want to treat you well. Arbor glanced at him mockingly. Is there something wrong with your brain? Do you want me to remind you again? My mother died a long time ago. Mu Xingchen remained silent. Scram! Arbor roared at him. His cold gaze was like a knife that stabbed into Mu Xingchen's heart. He was actually despised by his own sister. A black figure climbed onto the roof. Seeing so many people in the courtyard, he couldn't help but be startled. He then bowed and said, reporting to the Crown Princess, His Highness invites you to Chenyuan Grand Hall. Arbor glanced sideways at the youth and nodded. Amen. Prepare the carriage. Prepare the carriage for the Crown Princess. Hurry. Mu Xingchen watched as his little sister walked past him with an indifferent expression. His expression was a little blank for a moment. Mu Jingrui stepped forward and patted his shoulder comfortingly. Mu Qingya tightly clenched her wrist and suppressed her anger as she said, Investigate Xiao Xing's matter. Get to the bottom of it. I want to know who's playing tricks in the dark. To actually do this in front of the Crown Princess. Madam, Song Lu called out pitifully. Shut up. How unruly. It's my fault for indulging you guys too much. How dare you be so impudent in front of the Crown Princess? After you go back, you will have to copy the family rules 100 times, and half a month's salary will be deducted. If you dare to be so presumptuous in the future, I will not let you off so easily. Song Lu retreated sobbing. Mu Qingya, on the other hand, was still angry. She reached out to press on her chest, feeling a little dizzy. Mu Xingchen reached out to support her, but the word, mother, was suddenly stuck in his throat. When he thought of his younger sister's expression just now, as if she was looking at an enemy, he inexplicably couldn't bring himself to call her mother. Arbor left a noisy courtyard and took a carriage to the imperial palace. He was welcomed into the Heaven Origin Great Hall without any obstructions. At this time, the sun was shining brightly. The entire hall was enveloped by a layer of sunlight. Golden roof, red door, coral window. The cornice curled up and the grandeur was magnificent. Following the announcement, Arbor strode in with vigorous steps. Apart from a few old censors who had seen the little crown princess before, who had calm expressions, the other ministers couldn't help but sneak a glance. This was the little crown princess who had beaten the holy nun of the temple to the point that even her mother couldn't recognize her. When the crown prince saw that his wife had arrived, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Everyone inexplicably felt a trace of a spring breeze. The low pressure that had been pressing down on them just now was suddenly swept away. Wasn't this too exaggerated? She had already updated for 20 days, right? How miserable. Chapter 2667. Mo Lusheng, who was sitting on the dragon throne in the main hall, saw his son's good-for-nothing appearance and couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. Hu Dequan, who was standing at the side, saw this and hurriedly stepped forward. He took out a small purple gold cauldron from his sleeve and presented it to the great emperor with both hands. Mo Lusheng nodded. Hu Dequan reached out and opened the lid of the small cauldron. He brought the small purple gold cauldron in front of the great emperor and let Mo Lusheng take a breath. Arba cast a cold glance in that direction. A faint fragrance wafted into her nose, causing Qiao Mu to involuntarily crease her brows. Her fingertips brushed lightly, and a faint medicinal fragrance flowed, immediately sweeping away the fragrance. She didn't like to be contaminated with some inexplicable smell. Mo Lien held her hand and paused slightly, then raised her head to look at her father on the throne. At this time, Hu Dequan had already taken back the small purple gold cauldron, and the great emperor's expression seemed to be much better, putting down the hand that had been rubbing his head. The young couple silently looked at each other, and couldn't help but shift their gaze to Hu Dequan. The latter's body stiffened slightly under their sharp gazes, and the chubby claws under his sleeves couldn't help but tighten. What happened? Why were the crown prince and crown princess looking at him with such sharp gazes? Hu Dequan felt a trace of inexplicable fear. He was really scared out of his wits by those two masters along the way. Now, he wanted to be on good terms with the crown prince and crown princess. How would he dare to offend them? At this time, he was even more confused. But fortunately, the young couple glanced at him and immediately retracted their gazes. The steward of the Sun Moon Palace took a step forward and bowed to the young crown prince consort. Your Highness the crown prince consort, I am Steward Wen Quan of the Sun Moon Palace. Arba immediately understood why the crown prince wanted to bring her to Qian Yuan Hall. Manager Protector Wen Quan continued, Crown Prince Consort, please allow me to apologize to you. On behalf of my saintess, I would like to express my deepest apologies for my rude words earlier. Now, the saintess has received the punishment she deserves. Do you think we can... not dead? Arba turned to look at the crown prince. The crown prince shook his head and asked, Do you want her dead? Arba nodded. Die. Everyone was suddenly speechless. They secretly raised their heads and glanced at the cruel couple. What kind of godly development was this? Wasn't someone apologizing to her and begging her to let the saintess off? But this, the little crown princess suddenly said the two words, die, in all seriousness, causing everyone present to feel a chill run down their spines. Why did this scene suddenly seem a little funny? It should have been a very tragic thing, but when the crown princess said it so bluntly, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Manager Wen Quan was stunned for about 3 seconds before he hurriedly said, Crown princess, no, you. Sir Jojo stretched out a small palm and made a shut-up gesture. Crown Prince Mo lowered his eyes slightly, suppressing the urge to laugh in his belly. Nie Yaoguang spread rumors the moment she entered the capital, saying that I'm a disaster. Arba said mildly. I think before she said this, she was already prepared to die. Everyone, we actually have nothing to say in response. Wen Quan saw her determined expression, as if she really wanted to kill Nie Yaoguang. He couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Chapter 2668. Crown Princess, the temple is willing to use 1/10 of Chess Mountain's mining rights in exchange for the holy nun's life. Manager Wen Quan had no other choice and hurriedly brought out his trump card. As soon as these words were spoken, all the ministers in the hall began to whisper to each other in whispers. That was 1/10 of Chess Mountain's mining rights, which brought a lot of benefits to the imperial court every year. With so many spirit stones, it was enough to supply 10,000 people in the elite camp. A minister standing behind the king of Giant Pain quickly elbowed the king of Giant Pain's waist. The king of Giant Pain's face was dark, and he didn't want to speak. Hadn't he suffered enough losses at the hands of the young couple? Whoever opened their mouth would be unlucky. He wasn't a big fool, so why should he jump out and be the bird that stuck its head out? Prince Kong stood beside the king of Giant Pain. Seeing the king of Giant Pain's expression of, "I'll hold it in, I'll hold it in, I'll hold it in," he couldn't help but secretly twitch the corner of his mouth, thinking, the youngest's IQ has risen in a straight line. Today's matter, he actually didn't jump out and criticize the crown princess. It can be seen that he's starting to grow brains. No matter how Prince Kong ridiculed, the king of Giant Pain stood there calmly, watching the show without moving. Are you kidding me? Criticize the crown princess. He still freaking owed the crown prince consort a debt. If he criticized her now, wouldn't he be in a hurry to be criticized back? Moreover, he would definitely be forced to repay the debt in advance. Humph. He wouldn't say anything. Whoever wanted to fight for this 1/10 of the spiritual stone mine for the imperial court would have to *king do it themselves. The official behind the king of Giant Pain was somewhat anxious. He glanced sideways at the few imperial censors behind him and saw that each and every one of them was looking down at their noses. It was obvious that they would not open their mouths to speak. He could not help but feel stifled. What was going on with these imperial censors, who were usually the last ones to jump up and down to criticize others? Recently, they were so well behaved that it almost made people suspicious. Lord Jojo turned to look at the crown prince, but the crown prince shook his head at her and said, "Up to your mood." Obviously, that 1/10 of the spiritual stone mine's mining rights, to Prince Mo, wasn't even worth a single strand of hair on his wife's head. The ministers silently glanced at His Highness the Crown Prince. His Highness's attitude of spoiling his wife was to the heavens. Left Prime Minister Chen Chaoji was over 50 years old and had a strong body. Seeing that no one dared to speak, he stepped out of the crowd and bowed to the great emperor. "Your Majesty, I think that we can consider the Divine Hall's offer." The great emperor waved his hand. Let the crown prince handle this matter himself. Thus, everyone shut their mouths. The great emperor's words revealed his intention to protect his own. It couldn't be any more obvious. This meant that the crown prince and his wife would be fully in charge of the Divine Hall. Regardless of whether they accepted the compensation or not, it was the crown prince and his wife's business. Chen Chaoji frowned and turned to Prince Mo with cupped hands. "Your Highness, the 1/10 mining rights of Chess Mountain, to us." Half. Abba suddenly interrupted Chen Chaoji, her crisp voice resounding in the hall. "He also wants to give us 2 quotas to enter the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm," the Crown Prince added. Abba turned and glanced at the Crown Prince. Although she didn't know what the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm was, since her husband had mentioned it, he must have his reasons. The Sun-Moon Divine Hall's guardian was so angry that he was trembling all over. Even the tips of his fingers couldn't help but tremble. He was angered by that couple. An exorbitant demand, absolutely exorbitant demand. Chapter 2669. Who would have thought that this couple would be so shameless? They really dared to say anything? Half of the mining rights of Chess Mountain's Spirit Stone Mine. Ha, ha ha ha, ha. They were really impressive. They asked for half of Chess Mountain's mining rights right away. What a fool's dream. And I want to choose this half of the area myself. Arbor added. The custodian was so angry that he didn't want to say another word to her. Not only did this whimsical couple want half of Chess Mountain's mining rights, but they also wanted a spot to enter the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm? Ha ha, how was that possible? The Sun-Moon Mystery Realm was the best cultivation place that the Sun-Moon Temple had. The Mystery Realm opened once every 10 years, and it was never open to people outside the temple. What made them think that they could get a spot to enter the mystery realm? Sir Jojo blinked and nodded his little head in approval. And a spot to enter the Sun-Moon mystery realm. Although he had never heard of this mystery realm, any place that had the name of a mystery realm would definitely have great opportunities and treasures. Sir Jojo felt that it was good. Don't even think about it. Custodian Wen Quan, who was panting, couldn't help but roar angrily. Then let's not talk about it. Sir Jojo waved his little hand and shouted, Men, bring Nye Yaoguang here and execute him immediately. Everyone fell silent. The little crown princess was too dramatic. She didn't even give others a chance to think before saying this. The officials silently glanced at Steward Wen Quan, whose head was emitting green smoke, and lowered their eyes one by one without any moral integrity. You. Faced with such a bad attitude, the steward and the protector were so angry that they were about to ascend to the heavens. However, the crown prince was right beside the little crown princess. Looking at the crown prince's protective expression, if he dared to yell at the little crown princess, he would be the next one to enter the barrel of bliss. Forget it. He had to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. He couldn't afford to offend him, so he could just hide. Holding his breath, the custodian nodded with great difficulty and said, This matter is of great importance. I must ask the hall master before I can make a decision. The little crown princess nodded. All right, go back and think about it. Give me an answer before tomorrow morning. If you exceed the time limit, I will send you the sage nun's head. Everyone fell silent again. Manager Protector Wen Quan gnashed his teeth in anger. If he didn't make this trip today, the young crown prince consort might have already forgotten about Nye Yaoguang. Instead, it reminded this strange crown princess that she wanted to kill Nye Yaoguang. Was he rushing here to be tortured? The people from the Divine Hall were so angry that they left the hall without looking back. The Heaven Origin Grand Hall quieted down again, without a trace of sound. The strange crown princess said to the emperor, Father, if there's nothing else, my husband and I will go back first. We'll come to see you in 2 days. Mo Luxing looked at his daughter-in-law speechlessly. Ah Pui, not a daughter-in-law. She hadn't passed the 3rd test yet, so she wasn't a daughter-in-law. After saying that, Lord Jojo stomped in front of Hu Dequan and stretched out a white and tender hand. Hu Dequan was baffled and asked with trepidation, Crown Princess, what do you want? Mo Luxing waved his hand speechlessly and sighed. Give that purple gold cauldron to her. Give it to her. Hurry and send this weirdo away. What to do if it stings my eyes? Chapter 2670. Hu Dequan had an incredulous expression on his face as he reached out to take out the purple gold cauldron from his sleeve and handed it over to Lord Jojo with trembling hands. This strange little crown princess even wanted to freaking steal the emperor's medicine. Too shameless. Her shamelessness knows no bounds. Amolien lowered his eyes as the corners of his mouth twitched imperceptibly. He thought that Imperial Father must be on the verge of a mental breakdown right now. However, Lord Jojo must have her own reasons for doing this. He definitely had to support his little wife. Abba received the purple gold cauldron from Hu Dequan with a serious expression. Seeing Hu Dequan's trembling appearance, he couldn't help but frown. I won't eat you, what are you trembling for? All the officials in the hall looked up at the sky, speechless. Was Eunuch Hu trembling in fear? This strange little crown princess, can't you tell that she's trembling in anger? Abba took out a small white porcelain bottle from his pocket and tossed it to Hu Dequan. 1 pill every 3 days. Don't overdo it. After saying that, he didn't care whether the dazed Hu Dequan understood or not. He directly turned around and stomped back to the crown prince's side. The crown prince beamed as he held her little hand and waved at Hu Dequan. Remember the crown princess words. Give it to Imperial Father. Then, the young couple walked out of the hall hand in hand. When they passed by the King of Giant Pain, they didn't forget to turn to glance at him and say, Imperial Uncle, remember to pay your debts. Our eunuch Chen is out collecting debts every day. It's very tiring. You must all be more aware and don't give us trouble. Imperial Uncle, did you hear what my wife said? The deadline is almost up. Remember to quickly prepare it and send it over. Don't make everyone look bad. Strange, why did the king of Giant Pain suddenly tremble as well? The young couple looked at each other and walked out while muttering. Husband, the people in the hall are always trembling. I think it's because they're weak and can't sleep at night, causing some neurological disorders. Emolien's mouth twitched. Do you have medicine? Aleph * King, cure your sister. The ministers cursed in their hearts in anger. Was his body weak? This weird couple, they were just angry, okay? It wasn't until the two of them left that the palace regained a bit of life. The right Prime Minister Gao, glanced at the Prince of Giant Pain, who was standing beside him, trembling with anger. The corner of his mouth twitched as he comforted, Your Highness, don't be angry, don't be angry. The little crown princess is still young. Children don't know any better. Don't be angry, don't be angry. JoJo section break. Taiji Palace of Phoenix Emperor City. As Duan Yu flipped through the invitation letter in his hand, his gaze landed on a certain heir sitting across from him, who was leisurely sipping tea from a cup. You're going too? Prince Qing put down his cup and nodded. Must I go? The Crown Prince of King Qing nodded again. Yes. What's the point? Yes. Rong Qing gave him a clear answer. When the three provinces gather, the winds and clouds change. Whoever obtains first place on the Heavenly Prime roll will be able to obtain large amounts of resources and benefits for the province they belong to. This is a checkpoint to test each prince's ability. So, the Crown Prince and the Second Prince also have to go? Rong Qing shook her head. Those who weren't chosen naturally can't go. Duan Yu nodded, and his eyes brightened. They will also go? Rong Qing looked at him in confusion. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.